We are on the live, but not yet live, and TBD on name hostage session that Josh, our fearless marketing lead, is making us do. Welcome, Kyle.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, he also said don't break the third wall, which I immediately did. So we're off to a good start. We showed up though, so
Yeah.
here we
Hey,
are.
that's half the battle, showing up.
Yeah, that's right. Right time, right place, right uniform. We both got resources shirts on, so there we go. We're at uniform too.
There you
Um,
go.
so what's up, man? I know you did some traveling this week. I think I know I chatted with you last night. Was kind of debriefing. You sounded pretty pumped up. What you been up to?
Yeah, no, it was good. So we were up in New York meeting with a private equity firm, and about 40 or 50 of their CIOs across the fund, within the portfolio companies, and we were talking to them about the tech operating model, and kind of what that means for them in the different aspects, where they're at along that journey of transformation, given some of the different industries, different sizes of business. So everybody was in a little bit different spot along that journey. So it was a great conversation.
Yeah, no, that's a like highly technical portfolio too. So like a lot of financial services and technology companies. So like some real forward leaning people from a technology perspective in that room. What was feedback? What like how'd the talk go and you know how was it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It was there, so that fund particularly is, a lot of the portfolio companies are either technology companies or very tech enabled, with that type of focus. So in one instance, I thought that maybe it might be more tough to have that conversation with them, being that they're already forward leaning. But actually, I think what we find is that sometimes it's actually easier, right, to get into those room and people that get it, and so to have those exchange of ideas and kind of like-mindedness of like, yeah, this is where we're trying to go, and yes, we do see the challenges and what that journey looks like, and we can share best practices, without necessarily a defensiveness of being stuck in kind of an old way of doing things. So it was really good. I think where we started talking with them was, framing up what that spectrum looks like, right? Where we say, hey, this is kind of where we see that IT has been and how it's been looked at from a business perspective, and then where we see it going, or where it's at now, where we see it kind of going into the future. So we can dissect that a little bit, where we looked at what the past constraints were. If you think about IT 15, 20 years ago, largely it was, a team of people relegated to a server closet, right? And so the business, and they were doing what they're doing, and then they said, hey, just make sure our stuff runs. But for the most part, they weren't looked at as an integral part of the business strategy. They were looked at as a support element to the business. And a lot of that infrastructure was on prem, which then, what happened is you get these companies that are in the hardware game. They're having to rack and stack servers. They're having to forecast the needs of that hardware, which creates a lot longer deployment cycles of your applications, and infrastructure. And then what that leads to, if you're looked at as just kind of this relegated service that supports the business, you end up being looked at as purely a cost center. And then if you're a cost center as a business, what do we do to cost centers? We say, how do we compress that cost? How do we do pure spend reduction? And we're not looking at it as a differentiator in our market. We're looking at it as a transactional or commodity. And then we saw a lot of silos between business units or functions, right? That again, IT was just kind of walled off, and other segments of the business were all kind of straight lined task org. So that's what we described as very far left of spectrum. And then if we go kind of further into companies that are more forward leaning in tech, kind of disruptors in their industry, what we see is the other side of that equation, right? Where they're, instead of having long deployment cycles, they have a speed to market and a product velocity, where they're making not one change every 18 months, but they're making 18 changes a day in their code cycle, right?
Yeah. That's interesting, and I hadn't even thought about this until we're sitting here chatting through it. But you're talking about it at the company level. But something that's interesting about this is, we've been engaged with that particular PE firm for, call it, 4 years, and out of that, this is the first time they've had a portfolio-wide CIO council. And so it's like, even at a higher level, at a macro level, the importance of technology in those businesses. And again, like, this is a forward-leaning portfolio, but like, it's becoming more and more important. Historically, PE firms were doing CEO councils or things like that, where they would bring all the execs together.
Yep.
But at least that one was not doing CIO councils. And in our work with the various portfolio companies, like, it's something where they've said, hey, we want to do this peer-to-peer learning, right? Like the needs are and the demands from the business strategy are becoming more and more demanding, and they're really pretty hungry for that. So I know, in our conversations at the PE firm, they were very excited to get that going. But it's kind of interesting because it's like, at a macro level, even, like, it's becoming more and more important, which is obviously, like, great for us, but also great for those leaders, to be elevated in that stature. I know, like, even in your recap, a lot of what you talked about there was the technology, but I think a lot of what the talking points and where you got a lot of engagement, just kind of based on our debrief yesterday, was on culture, building a winning team, like delegating authority, like a lot of the stuff where there actually has been a lot of carryover from our background as special operations vets, and so really pretty cool to see. And then obviously I know you were pumped up last night, coming back. So glad to hear that went well.
Yeah. And I'll tell you exactly what you're saying. That's how the fund opened that conversation. So I believe it was either the creator of the fund or co-creator of the fund, got up there first thing in the morning and said basically exactly that, right? That, like, hey, this is the first time we've done this CIO summit, because we've recognized that, now the people in this room and the functions or the things that they're responsible for are now one of, if not the most important part of some of these businesses. And so it was a mindset shift in recognizing the value that the technology team can bring to the business. And that, that's a lot of what the conversation, started, was aligning strategy. So, you think of, there was the business strategy, and then you had the IT strategy, and those things somewhat were disconnected. And now what we're seeing is, not only is there an alignment to it, but there's actually somewhat of a fusion between the two. That your business strategy is your IT strategy, and your IT strategy is your business strategy. And you look at some of the biggest disruptors that we've seen in recent years, and what they've done in creating that, some type of platform or platform economy, and they've shifted the value from the producer into this platform. And a quick example of that is like an Uber. What's so obvious now is like, oh my God, as a business model, that makes a ton of sense. But what they did, I mean, it's still a car, it's still a driver, and it's still somebody taking you from point A to point B and charging you monies, right? So that production necessarily hasn't changed as much. What they've changed is this platform and the way that the consumer experience in that is, right? And I was flying into New York, and I get my bags, and there's some people standing around the baggage claim, like, hey, you want to ride, and have a sticker that says like Uber on a sign. I'm like, that doesn't seem safe to me, right? But that's prior to Uber, like that was the experience of like, I've got to go find a ride. But now what this platform has created, through enabling technology, is like, well, I know exactly how much that ride's going to cost me. I know that, like, I can see the route, so like I feel more safe, that the driver is taking me across the correct route to the correct destination. Like all of those pieces that were enabled, a whole business segment that was enabled, purely from this platform.
Yeah, it's like, Uber's obviously an interesting case study. We're gonna end up down a rabbit hole here, but I've read some various case studies on it, and the interesting thing about that, you ended up talking about it there, but what they were actually attacking was the unknown, right? Like, what they're actually delivering is when's it going to be there, when are you arriving, like in absolute clarity along this experience, which is super interesting. And you see it in other places too, right? Like Domino's, what's happening with my pizza and when's it going to be here, right? So it's like you end up looping back to what ultimately has been a for a very, very long time, a pillar of IT is the user experience. It's just, it used to be my employee experience
Yep.
much more than it was my consumer experience and what I was doing there. And so it's interesting, just kind of bringing it back full circle about the IT strategy being the business strategy is, very often your business strategy is how are your customers experiencing you? How are you delivering value and what is that? And turns out a lot of the value that consumers actually want is clarity, transparency,
Yeah.
and
Predictability.
things that ultimately reduce anxiety, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah,
Um,
it brings in a level of predictability, right? Because I remember years ago sitting in a cab, and all I had was some cash at the time, and you're sitting there watching that meter run, and you're like, I'm not familiar with this area. I've gotten a cab, like, well, I'm just watching it tick up and up and up, and I'm like, I hope I have enough money to cover the cab by the time I get there, and I hope this person isn't just like taking some random side street, racking up miles on me. So again, it provided a level of predictability that gives both, but it's better for the driver, it's better for the consumer, and kind of all the way around. And what you're talking about, that was a piece that we hit on. We called it customer obsession. That this technology, or looking, bringing the technologists into your business, and across your different functions, allows for this level of customer obsession, that you can really think about your customer experience, and whether that's B2B or B2C, you can enable an entirely differentiated experience with technology. And that doesn't necessarily, this is something we talked about a little bit, doesn't necessarily completely replace humans, but it allows you to put humans where humans are best, and put technology where technology is best, and then enable those humans to do more, or to be better informed, or to be more empathetic, or have more information at their fingertips throughout that customer journey, or throughout that product life cycle.
yeah, I guess taking it back to the macro view, I think one other kind of driving factor here for technology becoming even more and more important, especially in private equity owned companies, is the hold period is getting longer right now. Like there's
Yep.
just because of some of the macroeconomic things, right? So like the PE firms themselves are starting to look down at these companies and they're saying, okay, like what can we do to go in there, and maybe it takes a little bit longer to do, or maybe it's something we wouldn't have historically done, but what are we going to do to ratchet up the returns because our cost of capital is getting more expensive, at least in the near term. And so, really interesting time right now where we're seeing a lot of cool projects in our space.
Yeah, and I think that'll have some positive effects. That having that longer hold time allows you to see a little bit further down the field, or make a little bit longer term investments that maybe they wouldn't have if they were trying to sell in under that 3 to 5 year period. And so those level of investment up front that pay off towards the tail end. I think that's where you'll see some more disruption and some more innovation coming out, within those funds.
Cool. Ultimately, all this stuff is really great for us, and we're excited about that. So, um, Josh, our fearless marketing lead, is telling me that I should say, okay, cool, going to take a quick break.
No.